Namaste everyone, Yoga Chris here, and I wanted to talk about veganism because I've been receiving some questions about it, and you probably already know all of the information. It's all accessible to you. You do a little bit of research. There's so many documentaries on the subject, and in short, most people don't really feel like changing. It's, at some point you just stop talking to people about diet because it's as my teacher, David Garrigues said, and I was asking him about this because I had family members that were talking about meat in a way that was just like, I don't care, but it's kind of bothering me. Like, you all know I don't eat meat. Like, why would you talk about it like this? And his response was, nobody gives a shit, Chris. Like, if you want to go the route, there's a school of yoga called Jivamukti, and they have great stuff. But one of the ethos principles of Jivamukti is activism. And sometimes it kind of gets a little aggressive, activism does, especially about like animal rights and things like that. And so if you want to go that route, Chris, do that. But otherwise, nobody really gives a shit. And there was a lot of truth to that, of people don't care what your diet is. People don't care what the nutritional science is, especially since when you consider that science changes through time. You know, the egg is a great example. Like, it was healthy, and then it's unhealthy, and then the yolk is unhealthy, but the white is healthy. And then, one of the guys that I like reading his nutrition stuff is Bernard Jensen, and he makes a great case for how the egg, the chicken's egg, is the single most nutritious food on planet Earth. But I still don't eat eggs because I'm not doing it for that. And so I'll get into it. There's lots of reasons for me personally. And first, and I'll link it below, I have a couple of videos on shooting guns. And when I was a boy, I used to hunt a lot. And I've lived that life cycle of killing an animal, cleaning the animal, meaning like gutting it and everything after it's dead, and taking it to the butcher and then eating it. And I ate lots of meat up until about 24-ish, especially in the late teens, early 20s. I was wrestling at university and eating all the football player diet at OU, which is a big football school, and so on. I was eating tons and tons of meat. Later on, money was tight, and so it was mostly like chicken breast. But there was that. Then I came into yoga. I met a girl. She was my teacher, and we were dating. And so take that, all you people that teachers shouldn't date students or whatever. It's okay when it's a girl, but when the guy's the teacher, then it's, abusive power or something. And she would bring me, she didn't really convince me or try to convince me of anything, but she would kind of bring over those vegan snacks. And for me at the time, it was mostly ramen noodles and chicken breast. So, I didn't care. Fresh fruit and vegan snacks, like, meat eaters can eat vegan stuff. It's just kind of not the other way around. But what she got me into was like fasting, and just intermittent fasting, a day here, 2 days here, sometimes a juice fast, sometimes like a just no food, just drink water, drink water fast. And I noticed, because I'm a scientist, and at the time I had just completed my master's in industrial engineering, and I was always very analytical. Like, I kept logs of my dreams and logs of my calories. I was really big into calorie counting. And I noticed when I would break fast how I would feel differently. Like, if I ate, we had Brahms was a big thing there in Oklahoma. It's like a fast food burger place. And I remember eating a Brahms burger to break fast one day. And I remember another circumstance of eating, it was literally organic celery. And I think it was something that she had brought over because I didn't buy organic celery at the time. And I remember it was like, whoa, such a difference, like the energy it felt. And at the time I was big into drugs. I was using a lot of psychedelics. So it was all about like, how do I amplify the high, and how do I keep it long? It's kind of like Ram Dass talks about in Be Here Now, of looking for that endless high. And I found that meat was a buzzkill, but it seemed like fresh vegetables and fruits and just more alive things that maybe aren't cooked seemed to amplify all of the good feelings, the serotonin and everything that I wanted. Then as I started, because I still wasn't really that deep into yoga, I was doing like a little bit of postures, mostly reading. I was curious, and the reading was mostly like Wikipedia, so take that for what it is. But the postures that I was doing, it was a lot of compression around the belly, a lot of twisting, really getting the thigh deep into the belly, forward folding. And I noticed that it felt better on my gut when the contents of my tummy was not meat and was not dairy and cheese. And that's just kind of, it was a strictly feeling thing. I hadn't given up meat yet, and I wasn't even really considering it, actually. Years earlier, my sister had turned vegetarian before me, and I was that guy that was always like, you know, we have these canines because we're supposed to eat meat, and just all the evidence, you know, of whatever the pseudo evidence is for eating meat. And it was so interesting that, and ironic that later I, decided to stop eating meat. So basically, fast forward, I moved to Gainesville, and I had to fill my fridge. I had an empty fridge, and I just thought, well, I'm not going to eat meat. Like, it was never like a well thought out, like, I had stacked up all my evidence and weighed the pros and cons. It was literally just a feeling thing of like, I don't feel like buying meat. And I had experiences in meditation, in yoga, and in my psychedelic journeys of just experiencing a tremendous empathy for the suffering of animals. And like whatever you think about the consciousness of an animal, like it's very obvious that animals cry, that animals mourn the loss of like their mom or their baby, and that they avoid pain, they lean towards pleasure just like a human. Like, they might not have a soul or whatever, I don't need to get into that stuff. It's just, they experience pain, and do I need meat to survive? And I found the answer was no, I don't need meat to survive. At least at the time, that was my understanding. And so it came from like this empathy, that was the big push, that was like the straw that broke the back, was like, I don't like outsourcing the suffering. Like, if I want to eat meat, I should just kill it myself. And because I had done that, and I can do that. I'm totally psychologically capable of doing what's necessary to kill an animal and eat it. Like, and most of you who eat meat probably aren't. Or at least you've never tested yourself to see if you can. So I feel a bit more vindicated in that arena. So I go to Gainesville, Florida. I don't buy any meat. And pretty soon, after like 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed that I don't want meat or dairy and cheese either. And it didn't feel good on my gut while I was getting into yoga. Like, I moved to Gainesville, and it became immediately a daily practice of doing my posture practice. And so then I was vegan, and then I started watching the documentaries, and I was like, ooh, maybe I made a good choice. But that didn't happen before. And so I started accumulating all this evidence. But again, and there were a lot of comments from people there in Gainesville of like, they didn't know I was vegan. It would come out like 6 months or 12 months after knowing me, and we would go out and eat somewhere, and it's like, oh, you're vegan? I didn't know. That's so interesting. And I'd be like, why is that so? And they would say, because everybody who's vegan likes to brag that they're vegan. Like, yeah, I'm vegan, and they almost shame meat eaters for eating meat. And a statement that I heard 2 or 3 times was, you don't wear your veganism on your sleeves. Which, that's when I realized what, wearing it on your sleeve meant, is I'm not telling people about it, because I don't care what you do. Like, what I care about is how you like treat the process, and what your thoughts are about animals, and what your thoughts are about people who choose not to eat meat. Like, if there's going to be aggression or argument there, like, then I don't want to hang out with you. But other than that, I don't give a shit what you do, because I can't prove to you that like an animal has a soul or whatever. And so it's a struggle for me to do it. I would rather just concern myself with my own issues. And so then fast forward, there's a lot of kind of energetic. I have a video, it's a few years old or 2 years old now, about the frequency of food and how you can feel if a food is going to be conducive to your well-being. And that's literally, there's always going to be an imposition of ego in that process. But you can, if you just open yourself up to the sensitivity, just feel if a food is going to feel good for you, if it's going to help you or not. And that'll help you guide yourself in the process. There were difficulties that came along the process. For example, my palate. My taste buds needed to change. So I was looking for like sugary things and salty things. I hadn't yet developed a tolerance for spice. I actually had very little tolerance for spice when I was eating meat. Pepperoni was too spicy for me and would give me heartburn. And I am Italian, and my mom cooked Italian, and so it was a lot of sausage and pork growing up, and then other things like ground beef and whatever. My grandpa had a cow farm, so that's kind of the lineage I come from. And So I remember in the beginning it was mostly juicing. A lot of my calories came from juicing cauliflower, apples, and um, I think carrots. That was like my thing, that I would juice those things. And I was still eating like noodles, lots of noodles. Then after about 8 or 9 months, I turned anemic, and that's like low iron in your blood. And so you start like you get diarrhea, you get blood in your stool, and very low energy. Your attention span kind of goes. And I lost a lot of weight. I was about 10 pounds lighter than my wrestling weight. I got down to 149, and which was like right now, as a very lean yogi and very not a lot of muscle compared to when I was wrestling, I'm still about 165. So I got down to 149, and that was not healthy. Then a friend suggested I eat an egg, and I tell her, I'm like, I'm not going to eat an egg. And she's like, all right, we'll just eat some spinach. So I grab a handful of spinach, and I eat it, and within 2 hours, my stool totally fixed. Everything, energy came back, and I was like, wow. And so I started doing research on anemia. And it was an iron deficiency, and the leafy greens had iron. One more time I turned anemic because I wasn't, leafy greens are bland. Like, I'm a vegan, and I would say leafy greens are bland. You know, you got to add things to it, but they're highly nutritious. And so I turned anemic again, ate some spinach, and fixed it right up. And that's when I'm like, all right, I need a little bit of greens every day, and that's like medicine. Every day I need, you know, Grandpa takes his morning pills. I take my morning leafy green. At some point, I had a B12 deficiency, which kind of feels a little bit like fibromyalgia from what I've read about fibromyalgia. So it was a very sensitive, kind of your nerve endings. Your skin is very sensitive to touch. It almost feels like pins and needles a little bit. Memory, again, is a kind of thing. B12 helps create the fatty coatings around nerve endings. And so I just started eating nutritional yeast. Fixed it right up. And then all of the, you know, anti-vegans would be like, well, yeast is bacteria. And it's like, come on, dude. Like, I get it. There's living things around. Every step you take, you're stepping on bacteria. You're eating plants that have bacteria. You're eating yeast that have bacteria. The plants themselves are alive. I need to live. And if you're trying to say that bacteria or lettuce is of the same quality of life as a cow or a chicken, then, I mean, we can't talk anymore, because that's absolutely stupid. And that's just a ridiculous argument. So yes, I eat living things to survive. Maybe one day I can live on air, and there's still bacteria in the air, so there's always going to be a hater, right? So, but I fixed B12. I actually haven't used nutritional yeast in probably 2 or 3 years. So I think it was actually kind of psychosomatic. Like, it was just the mind that was like, ooh, I'm maybe not getting what I need. Because I do come across vegans that like have a laundry list of supplements. They're like, I need this, 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 and this. And it's like, I don't. I eat a kind of diversity based on, you know, I like carbs, I like fats, and I don't ever think about protein, ever. I went through a protein deficiency, whatever, where basically the joints were really achy, especially in my spine. And I found it very peculiar because it was every single disc, the whole spine, 30 of them or whatever, however many there are, 32, were achy in every movement, twisting, backbending, just walking, and then my joints themselves were achy. And I needed to determine if it was like a gluten sensitivity, because I eat lots of bread, and I was at least, I don't so much anymore, or if it was a protein thing, because there's similar symptoms. So I did some experimenting with myself, ate some bread, didn't affect me, ate some protein powder, put some hemp protein in a smoothie, and fixed it right up. So I ate protein powder for a few months, and again, I haven't had protein powder in probably over 2 years, and not a problem. And I'm more active now than I was, because I was a PhD student, and so many hours of my day was like sedentary. And now I'm more active, and there's nothing happening. I'm not saying that nothing will happen. Probably a new obstacle will come up. But I looked to my first yoga teacher, Doug Swenson, who's been a vegan for about 45 years. And he's very skinny. And why does that matter? Unless you're trying to impress people with your bodies, which as a guy, that's not going to get you very far. The only reason you're trying to impress people with your body as a guy is to intimidate other guys or to attract females. And the female is not that attracted to your body. It's just you're attracting her in the way that you think she wants to be attracted. You're attracting her in the way that she's attracting you, which is with her body. And so for girls, skinniness, and it's often not skinniness, it's leanness, and yet a softness and a voluptuous like silhouette. And I'm not here to say veganism will or won't do that, but it will amplify your sensitivity to subtleties. It'll amplify your sensitivity to personalities, to I'm avoiding the jargon terms of like auras and prana, but it amplifies a sensitivity to unseen feelings around you that aren't necessarily within you. And that's been a lovely journey, because there's so much, that's a rabbit hole to explore that. Like, why is there's so much around us that we can feel, that we can't see, that we were never educated on in public school? And why is that? And so that's a really, it's part of existence, that, you know, we're alive to experience these subtleties, and yet we're not, because we have other motives, you know, and that's good. Have motives to make money and all that stuff too. So there's probably a couple other things that I could add in. You know, it's a journey of learning about nutrition, and a lot of the issues that come up, I'm firmly convinced that they're in the mind. I'm sure that there's protein deficiencies and anemia and whatever, but since I've stopped caring about that stuff, and my diet now, as I'm a traveling yogi, it's not the best. You know, if I were to settle down somewhere and be able to have a fridge and keep produce there, and it would be better. But essentially, I aim to start my day with something vegetable and alive. Like, I like carrots or just any kind of leafy green. Sometimes I'll start it off with something fatty, like nuts. And then throughout the day, it's just, you know, if I'm working my cyclic fasting, which I've kind of fallen away from that in the last couple of weeks. So I did about 2 months of cyclic fasting, where 18 to 20 hours a day I wasn't eating. And then it would be feasting for like 4 hours on a big salad, with lots of fatty oils and olives and avocado, and then something carbohydrate related, which could just be bread or noodles or rice, maybe some beans in there. And, you know, so it's not the most diverse diet, but there's no complications coming up, and I feel like I've got tons of energy and highly sensitive to subtle energies around me. And so whatever, I don't know. I've been on this journey for 6 years, and it's not a big deal. Like, someone asked me the other day, are you open, like, could you see yourself in the future, like, going through a year time period of just eating meat? And it's like, I could, but I'm not worried about the future. Like, at some point it might happen. And in the last 6 years, I have eaten meat. Like, there was a time, you know, because mom and dad, they were almost offended that I became vegan. And they wouldn't say it like that, but you could see it in their face, that it was like, because somehow I'm abandoning their tradition that they've endowed me with. And it's almost like the tendency would be to think that you think I'm doing it wrong, that I eat meat and you've stopped eating meat. And it's like, so somehow you're better than me, or somehow you think that what I'm doing is immoral. And yes, on some level I do. That's the truth of it. If I think that eating meat is unethical, then if you eat meat, that's slightly unethical. But there's probably things that I do that you think are unethical. And at some point, we got to create distinction of how are you treating other people. And people are senior to animals because we move more material, we move more energy, we have greater potential for destruction and greater capacity for empathy than any animal. So there is a hierarchy here. There's also aliens that are higher than us. So whatever. How you treat other people is kind of senior to that. And so if you eat meat but you're really good to people, then you're my person. Like, I like you. That's cool. And there's definitely some residue of, oh, you eat meat, then, you know, like, I couldn't have a girlfriend that was eating lots of meat. My girlfriend eats a little bit of meat sometimes, and it's changing. Her diet is transforming. And who knows, in 20 years, at some point, I may say, there's no more meat in your diet, or we can't be together. That might happen, and that's my choice. I have that choice, and she has that choice also. But she does the respectful thing of, like, brushing her teeth, and maybe because I travel, so it's a distance relationship, so sometimes it'll be like a week before, and then she'll stop eating meat until, like, I'm gone or whatever. And so that's cool. I don't know that there's much more. There's probably always more that I could say on the subject, but that's just kind of been my journey into veganism, and it just feels good, and it makes me feel good ethically also. It physically feels good. I'm complimented a lot for, like, how youthful I look and how good my skin is, and I don't know if that I do know I had a lot more acne, a lot more pimples and things when I was eating meat, even though I was exercising a lot. And also, okay, so this last point, keep in mind, because I was working with an older gentleman who wanted to lose weight as part of his therapy practice. And the thing is he's older. He's in his mid-60s. He's not going to become very, very active at this point in his life, especially with the injuries that he has. So it's never going to be returning to that like high school or college kind of kid, or even the young man that was very active. Like that's just, it's not coming back, right? So the losing weight is going to come on the diet side of things. Yeah, we can do exercises that is going to be very revitalizing and invigorating. But the diet is the other side of the coin that, and it's more than just counting calories, I've learned. You gotta, maybe I'll make more videos. I mean, I was like a scientist when it came to cutting weight and diet, and that's what you call it in wrestling, like cutting weight. And 20 to 25 pounds was the norm to be able to lose. A lot of that's water, but it was, if I were able to talk about the manipulation of my body composition and just the self-awareness of how do I retain mass and what's being held in the excretory system, the elimination system. You hold a lot of mass in the intestines that is just waiting to be released. More so if you eat meat, because that stuff sits. You eat more fibrous things like vegetables and it passes more easily. And so I'm telling him this and I'm like, reduction of meat. And you could tell he immediately turned off to that. And I'm like, listen. The amount of meat that you eat is the diet of a hunter and gatherer, primarily the hunter. You're on the trek, 12, 15 miles a day. You're hunting game and you're always on guard. And it's a readiness. You're at a sympathetic nervous system, like fight or flight mode all the time. That's the kind of physical body that requires lots of meat. And if you're not doing that, which you're not, then you're accumulating an excess of meat in your system that's not being utilized. And there's so much science. You just look on it. And again, science changes through time, but at some point, does that mean you hold on to old evidence because you're just waiting for the new evidence to be invalidated? Like at some point you want to adopt the new evidence at least a little bit, and excess protein acidifies the body. Acidified body creates the environment for cancer to thrive. We all have cancer. We have 70 trillion cells in our body. Everybody, including myself, a few of those cells are cancerous. But a balanced pH in the system allows ATP to be generated, which is the energy source for cells to be able to repair themselves. And if the pH is too low, meaning acidic, the cells won't produce ATP. And if you don't have enough ATP, the cell can't repair itself. It's like if the bridge is broken, you need to send a bunch of trucks to fix the bridge, but the trucks run on fuel. And if you have no gasoline, you can't fix the bridge. Even if you got all the raw materials and the labor waiting, you need fuel to go fix the bridge. You can't fix a cancerous cell or eliminate it, destroy it, or send it out of the system if you don't have ATP. And you're not producing enough ATP if your body is acidic. There's so much science about it that it's kind of stupid not to listen to that. But also understand that I get it. I was that meat eater that was shaming my own sister for becoming a vegetarian because I had XYZ, ABC evidences of why we eat meat. Just so you know, there's also ABC, XYZ evidences for why not to eat meat. Really long intestines, these kind of teeth that are for munching and grinding like herbivores, and so on. The fact that if you put a banana and some kind of weak bunny rabbit in front of a baby, the baby will go for the banana. Most of our primate relatives, although some of them may eat a little bit of meat, they're not carnivorous. They're definitely omnivores and mostly fruits and vegetables. And well, you could say, well, our brains are bigger. We needed more protein but the brains are fueled on fat. So that doesn't make sense. And also, obviously, as you move more north or south, but definitely more north towards the Arctic, there's less produce. So you eat more meat. So cultures or people that have that ethnicity, they're going to be more disposed to eating more meat. Their body can handle it better versus more tropical ethnicities, not as much. So a lot of your physical ailments will be reduced or fixed by changing your diet. You do your own research. I'm not a nutritionist, so take what I say at face value. And my PhD is in a different subject, environmental sciences. So my mindset has a lot to do, okay, here's one last key point, the environmentalism of eating meat. And obviously, it uses more fossil fuels. Obviously, it uses more resources, more soil, more water consumption. if you just follow the food pyramid, the animals are eating the vegetables that we could be eating. Now, we feed them the lowest grade vegetables. It's obvious. It's usually just the scraps. And so that's great. But that's also not their diet. So we're feeding them an inappropriate diet. And if you trace backwards all of the energy requirements it takes to produce some given amount of meat, let's say 1,000 calories of meat versus 1,000 calories of corn or something, it takes a lot more energy to produce the meat. The meat might have more bioavailable substances, but it's a huge disparity. 3,000, 4,000, 10,000 calories of corn, it's still less resources than 1,000 calories of meat. And not to mention the suffering aspect of that to the animal. So that was more my PhD research. It's not exactly what my research was, but obviously I read dozens of papers on it. And the scientific community is somewhat divided about that subject, but you got to know that in academia, everybody's being funded by governments. And the governments have at their interest, their core value of subsidizing their homies, their friends. And their friends own big factory farms. So it's in their interest to recommend to you a food pyramid where meat is very prominent. It's in their interest to subsidize meat so that you go to the market and somehow the meat is cheaper than the produce, even though it took produce to produce the meat. How does that make sense? It's called, they take your tax dollars and they pay their meat producing friends so that they can offer meat for cheaper, so that somehow meat gets promulgated. I mean, then you start getting into conspiracy theories about, well, everybody who has an acidic body, you have more cancer. And then you rely on the government healthcare system for that. So somehow subsidizing meat keeps you hooked on the healthcare system that's fixing the problem that would just be fixed if you stopped eating so much meat. And it's like, yeah, but, and then it comes back to, am I abandoning my heritage? Am I somehow dishonoring my mother and father if I decide not to eat meat? At some point, you got to be autonomous and decide for yourself. And just know that just because mom and dad smoked cigarettes doesn't mean you need to smoke cigarettes to honor the fact that they smoked cigarettes. You let go of that and make your own decisions. So this was far longer than I intended it to be. I hope you found it helpful, valuable. Please comment below if you did. Share it if you think somebody would like this. But also know that people who are eating meat, just like I was, don't give a shit. They're not going to all of a sudden watch and be convinced because you share the video. But maybe there are a few people that you know that are like on the fringe, that, they're looking to change their lifestyle, but there's resistance all around them. There's a lot of people being shamed. I have a student that she's in the military and she gets shamed for not eating meat. And I get it. People tease you. My big thing was to call out guys because generally women don't shame me. And if they do, I just call out their body. It's no sexy woman I have found, like a very sexy woman has tried to shame or guilt me for not eating meat. It's usually just not very sexy, and so then you just start insulting their body. Like, I'm not going to let you slap my mind around and make me feel guilty about veganism. Like, it's one thing if you're being playful, but if you're trying to, persuade me through your shame and guilt tactics, then I'm going to shame and guilt your body that you look like a heifer. And some people might think that's mean, so don't follow me. Unsubscribe from my channel if you think that's uncalled for. And for the guys, I usually shame their sexuality or their manliness. So they call me out for being a vegan, I'll be like, how many animals have you killed? And then I might use some derogatory term to effeminize them. And so for her, it was basically that. I told them to call out their penis size. It sounds like you have a really small penis, and that's why you're concerned about me eating meat. Something like that, and that shuts them up right away. Like those big, tough military guys, they're like, so-and-so, you can only eat lemon ice cubes. And it's like, I understand now why your mom told me your penis is so small. And they will stop because aversion attraction. If they're insulting you because it gives them pleasure, they get a laugh out of it. If you make them insulting you painful for them, they will stop insulting you. It's Pavlovian conditioning. And that is part of ahimsa, which is the first part of the first limb of yoga, nonviolence. And so we don't need to, obviously everything I've said has to do with the nonviolence of, animals, nonviolence to nature, nonviolence to future generations. I mean, one day, all of the animals on this planet, every animal of significance, besides people and rodents, are going to be extinct. It's guaranteed. Just look at the trend. I'm not here to try to stop it because it's a big momentum and that's not my purpose in life. But all of the animals, lions, rhinoceros, elephants, all kinds of just big mammals, wolves, bears, they're all going to be extinct. Give it 200 or 300 years, every single one will be extinct. Dolphins, whales, they'll be extinct. There's too many people, and we're just trashing the environment. And those that aren't extinct will just kind of be in zoos, and they'll be, that kind of existence, is that I'd rather die. I'd rather die than be living in a zoo as an animal. So just know that that's happening. And I don't want to contribute to that. And you say, well, cows are not wolves. Well, it's something called a food chain. And when you start to mess with the food chain, because cows have a place, pigs have a place in the food chain, and you've taken them out. And so that's, there's all kinds of just multivariable, multifaceted consequences of your diet choices. And it's not just you. So don't take all the blame on yourself, because it's society. And again, nobody gives a shit what your diet is. But just know that I have in my mind a value for the essence of animals that I don't want to contribute to their suffering. And that's why I'm vegan. And so those of you that are maybe on the fringe, maybe this was helpful for you. You're looking for some kind of evidence, like you viscerally, you just don't want to do it anymore, but people around you are asking you questions and you don't know what to say. I mean, this is what I say, but only if they seem sincere. If I can tell in their tone that they're asking me the question because they're looking for a weakness or a hole in my argument that they can attack, then I apply the techniques of communication. You can see my social mastery. Usually I will respond with a question. They say, well, why are you vegan? And I'll say something like, well, why does that matter? And that's confrontational, but that's because subliminally they're looking for a conflict. And I will not invite that into my mind. The doors are closed until I hear in your tone a sincerity about just understanding why. Why for me? And it's totally subjective. So this video was far longer than I wanted. I'll do my best to cut it down. And that's it for now. So subscribe to the channel. And Silent Flute is a phenomenal program, so definitely consider joining that. It's at 9th limit. It's only $97 a month. And I give a lot more on yoga. This was just kind of a supplementary video. So I hope to see you there, and I'll catch you in the next video. Namaste.